Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined as always by my good buddies Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael like to debate and deliberate the most ubiquitous aspects of many given topics. Well, they're not given to us; we choose them.
Sometimes they're given to us.
Yeah,
by
sometimes
you.
they are.
Yeah.
Sometimes by
That's
you,
true.
Jeff.
Sometimes by our listenership and our Facebook ship and social media ship, and we're grateful for that. This week's no different as they debate and deliberate the Mount Rushmore of aspects of wealth from a bygone era. Wow, that's a hipster. That's a bespoke topic.
Yes, it is.
That is a West
All
wearing.
the other crappy Mount Rushmore type podcasts are not going to have chosen this as one of the
They're
things
not.
they talk about.
This topic is mulling essentials, herbs and spices behind a bar
Right.
as a mixologist in Los Feliz somewhere. Who chose it?
You.
I
You
did.
did.
Okay.
This was
You
yours.
foisted
Are you
this upon
serious?
us. Yeah.
I thought I pulled it from somewhere from the anyway. Okay, yeah. So the reason why I love this topic.
Busted.
I remember reading that lobster is this very elegant kind of richy rich food now, but it used to be stuff that they would give prisoners. It was just dregs from the bottom of the
Sure.
ocean.
They're like
Like spiders. They're sea
Cockroach of the
spiders.
sea. Yeah. And so there's something that was part that used to be something of the poor, and now it's something of the wealth. And then there's stuff that not necessarily is for poor people now or non-wealthy people now, but used to be part of the lifestyle of a wealthy person. So, yeah.
Oh, fun. I mean, it's
Stop it.
all of
That is
the
big lobster. It just texted Jeff to
Well, that's the
tell him
indicator that the show's over.
that's drawn butter sending you a message being like, lobster's nothing without us. Fuck off.
So I don't know. So why don't we discuss this wearing our ascots and
Our monocles. My monocle may pop off if I hear anything too exciting. So
driving my Duesenberg. Okay, so Richard, keep your monocle on and let us know your first choice.
all right, my first choice is the humble pineapple.
Oh, well.
This is something that came to me via my wife. We were discussing this last night on our way to a birthday party. And I kind of knew a little bit about this, but she sort of clued me in on some of the more specific details. Because I knew that pineapple was something that was very exotic throughout history.
Yeah.
It was first discovered by Christopher Columbus when he wasn't busy, murdering Native Americans and Native peoples.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. He was spotted on the Caribbean island of Guadeloupe.
Wow.
By Christopher Columbus.
Like he was the first Westerner.
Westerner. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah,
obviously the
yeah.
people who were there.
Yeah.
But the first Westerner.
Hey, what's that? We never saw that.
I mean, that rock from the tree rock. Yeah, we don't know. We don't eat those things.
Yeah.
I don't know. What is that?
He's eating him. He's eating him. What an idiot.
Like, why would you eat? To be fair,
Yeah,
why would you eat one of those things if you didn't already know?
they're murder fruit.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until like 1900 with the Dole family that pineapple became a commodity and something that could be grown en masse and shipped around the world.
Wow.
So back in like the colonies, the colonial period of Americas, for example, it was rich people would spend the equivalent of like $8,000
Wow.
on one pineapple
Wow.
to be able to show off that they could buy a pineapple.
Take that, Japanese square watermelons.
Yeah, and if you couldn't afford your own watermelon, you could rent a watermelon
What?
for your party.
Wow.
And the people who had the
Pineapple, you mean?
Or, I'm sorry, pineapple. You got me all screwed up, Winfield. Yeah, you could rent a pineapple, and your local pineapple sewer or whatever he was called would bring his pineapple, and you would have it for your party, and just show it off like, hey, look what I got.
Oh.
I'm rich enough to be able to afford a pineapple.
So you wouldn't-
even though it wasn't really your pineapple, you were just renting it.
You wouldn't consume it.
You would just have it there. It would be like part of your centerpiece. It would be like the centerpiece of your centerpiece.
I hope that
so to speak.
I hope that the pineapple renter guy would come back at the end of the party and be like, I don't know. Look at the wasn't as bruised as it was when you first got it. Look right here. Look on the side. Right here. Look right here. No, look real close right here. This little spine here. That one was full.
Did you purchase the pineapple insurance? You got to purchase the pineapple insurance, my man.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
Do you
pineapples.
That's funny because I just figured Dole just kind of jumped on the train. I didn't realize that they invented this infrastructure for this.
Sure, yeah. I mean, he basically the first Westerner to start a pineapple plantation in Hawaii and really turn it into a marketable fruit.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was just something that was out in the Caribbean, and it was just super rare to be able to get it. If you wanted to try and get it either in Americas or certainly in Europe, chances are what you would get is a rotting pineapple by the time it got off the ship.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's cool. That's really fascinating. All right, Michael, what's your first?
All right, I'll stick with food too. Salt.
Yeah.
Salt's one of those things. All spices in general. Back, several 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, a long time ago, like spices were just hard to get. Salt was hard to get, and having salt to flavor things, it seems easy now. I think that's part of almost what you were talking about, Jeff, at the very top, was that things that seem luxurious now were not back then, or vice versa. Salt is literally it's in everything. It is, everyone has a giant box of it in their home. They're easy to get now, but back in the day it was a very heavily valued substance. I was talking with my wife, Emily, about salt, and one of the theories, or one of the reasons why people drink with their pinky out was because that was their spice finger, and they dip it in salt or spice so they wouldn't touch all of their food at the same time with all of their fingers, and so you just kind of take a little dab of salt on your mouth and not all of it at the same time. But salt's this, I think it's weird to think of food without what salt brings out of it.
Right.
To think of how bland food must have been for so many people. I mean, I can't imagine what they had when they first, like you said, tried a pineapple.
Yeah.
And it's just what the hell is this thing?
Blown people's minds.
No way. Same thing with salt or just any kind of spices in general. They had the big spice trade coming across, the Silk Road and across Asia and Eurasia. And salt was just one of those things. It was just you needed to have it.
I could also see it not just maximizing the flavor of good food, but covering the flavor of bad food too.
Yeah,
if you
sure.
And I think I think the corn in corned beef is actually salt. It's when you say corn, they're referring to corn-sized salt chunks that help. So that's not necessarily completely a flavoring process, but a preserving.
I mean,
process,
that's a good point. Is the salt was used to preserve things, keep food going longer. So the more you had of it, the longer your food supplies could last. Bearing stuff under the ground too, and whatever. But
okay, so is it spices in general or just salt?
I'm gonna say salt.
Okay, Winfield. Okay, all right, worth is salt. Okay. Okay, what do you got, man? Ready for your second one?
My second choice, I'm sticking with food, and I'm going with ice cream.
Oh, wow, cool.
Which makes a lot of sense because up until the early 1800s, there was not mass refrigeration or mass ice houses.
Yeah.
Or kind of ice rooms or ways to be able to freeze stuff. So the ability to serve ice cream to your guests was like this exotic and special treat that only the elite were able to do. And especially if you were serving it not just on kind of to one person, you could make some really quickly and get it out there. But if you were serving it at a banquet or a big reception or something like that where you had to serve hundreds of dishes of ice cream, that was something that was a very rare treat that you needed to have, servants and people working around the clock to prepare this ice cream and keep it cold and do everything you needed to do to be able to serve it. And now it's just, you think about it, it's ice cream is just everybody eats ice cream. Yeah. It's just the most, I had ice cream today for lunch. I don't know. I didn't, you don't think twice about it.
Was it salted pineapple flavor ice cream? We're just going to get through all of our...
Just it's rolling it all up into one big ball. No, but ice cream. It's just one of those things where individual refrigeration was not necessarily something for the rich, but being able to refrigerate something in that mass quantity and be able to serve it was something that was considered to be the Provence.
Yeah, that seems to speak, like you said, to the logistics of having just to serve it. That many people, that many servants, that many... everything quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way.
I didn't either, but yeah.
There's a fun podcast, and maybe you're a fan or listener, Cocaine and Rhinestones.
I've heard it before, yeah.
He does get a little long-winded about some analogies for cultural milestones in country music by comparing them to bigger milestones in the world. And one of the things was the variety of music that exploded in the early part of the 20th century. And they made a comparison to ice cream. Like in 1940, there was 2 types of ice cream. And then 30 years later, there was 1,000 types of ice cream in the stores. And entertainment became like that, too, with music.
Right.
There was kind of like maybe 2 types of music. And then
Jug music.
yeah.
Was all just like you just...
Right.
Then it was Benny Goodman and his hayseed cousin, Moondog Goodman. But you also, if you look at cookbooks around the time of the mid 50s, they showed the impact of the lack of refrigeration. So you would have like leftover pie or anything you could do to preserve and extend the usefulness of food.
Right.
And then 20 years later, when everybody had a refrigerator, and all access to all these exotic foods and things like that.
George Washington apparently spent $200 on ice cream at Mount Vernon in 1790.
Wow.
Which makes sense because with his wooden teeth, he would not get any ice cream headaches.
Do you think this is true, or do you think this is a lie?
Oh, I don't know. George Washington would never lie.
He would
about
never
ice
tell
cream.
a lie. He would chop it down a
Well,
cherry
it's
tree.
cherry flavored ice cream.
Cherry
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Ice cream, and Winfield's second one is probably hot cream.
Hot cream,
Hot cream.
exactly.
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce.
Books.
Books. Wow,
Books.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Before Gutenberg,
Steve Gutenberg?
before Steve Gutenberg invented the printing press in the first Police Academy movies, invented kind of like a movable type and kind of a more reusable print. Printing presses had existed before Gutenberg, but they were kind of these big kind of screw down sort of things and very difficult, not easy to do. But once kind of movable type and the printing press kind of was able to put out pieces of paper more efficiently and the same thing and kind of manufacture books, books became a lot easier to acquire and use, and especially like the Bible kind of flourished again around the world. But before that, if you had a book, it was mostly hand lettered, handwritten, sewn, put together by a person, and only it took hundreds of man hours to put one book together, and I'm sure the equivalent of however much that cost to purchase.
Yeah.
So to have a book, let alone a library of books, meant that you were a very wealthy person.
All of these things that are the marks of wealth. I can imagine going over to somebody's house and just having everybody pick out a book and go, whoa, I'm holding the ice cream. Whoa, hey, touching the ice cream.
I'm putting the ice cream near the book. It's going to ruin it. Whoa.
I think we definitely take for granted, like on Saturday morning, Felix and I went to our local library and, checked out 15 different books for this next couple of weeks to go through and whatever. And like, they have, 200,000 books there, different books. You can just walk in and borrow up to 30 at a time. And you're just like, and then they'll just bring them back in 3 weeks. And to imagine that was, not nearly, it was just an impossible thing 500 years ago.
Yeah. I also find it interesting. There probably was a time where one may have the opportunity to acquire a book, but you still may not have an entire family that's literate or that has not the training to read it.
For sure. I mean, that's kind of a way to hold on to your wealth is to keep it in the home, make sure that only the people that are wealthy can read.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that really have the access to being able to buy a book and and read a book and be educated in that way. I'm sure people, once the printing press and once, things became more available, it opened things up. But prior to that, that's more the 1% holding on to the 1% by being the ones that could have these books.
Was it Stephen Fry thing where he's talking about what Gutenberg was not necessarily a purveyor of words. He was a seller of religious paraphernalia. So his scam before this was selling this periscope-like object that would allow somebody standing outside the Vatican or whatever to see the Pope. So it would be like a mirror, kind of concave mirror. And when you held it up, you could now extend your arm above all the masses, and this metallic reflector would show you the image of whoever was.
He also did like the food dehydrator too.
Yeah, the Ronco.
Yeah, that was one of his too.
Slapping.
Yeah.
He did the suck cut and the.
I think they talk about like what literacy was before.
What was
like,
that? Not Seven Deadly Sins. What was the name of his great inventions? That whatever it was. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Gutenberg. And they were saying like, were you to be reading? Literacy was so often an aspect of religious ceremony that if you were to encounter
the books that were being made were Bibles. They were being made by the church or whoever. Yeah.
And they were mostly made so that you would read them aloud in ceremonies. So if you walked in somebody reading silently by themselves, you would think, what the fuck are you doing? It would be like if you saw somebody reading sheet music and just going and looking down at it. Okay, so this is our halftime, and at this point, we implore you to go out and download, rate, and review past episodes. We'd really appreciate it if you did. And then do us a solid and share the Mount Rushmore podcast with your loved ones. We may not be wealthy, you may not be wealthy, but you can give people the...
Speak for yourself, sir.
the priceless gift. You are wealthy in family, both of you gentlemen. You have such nice... families and kiddos and things like that, and I love hearing your stories about the fun you have with them. That was a weird side note. Okay, I sound lonely. And let people know how much you like. No, lie to people. Saying you really like the Mount Rushmore podcast, and then recommend that they download it too. And then also, you can suggest a topic for us by going to the Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and letting us know a topic you think would be cool. And we are back with our round 3, and then Richard Manfredi is going to let us know what Richie Rich thing that Mr. Howell had on Gilligan's Island.
I don't know why I went French all of a sudden. I can tell you why I went French, actually, because my third choice is the color of nobility and power in France and many other societies, red.
Wow. Okay.
Mine, third choice, was the color purple.
Oh, wow. The book?
Wow.
And later the novel?
The Tyrian purple, the color of kind of the upper class in Rome way back when. So we're kind of on the same.
We're on the same wavelength.
Wavelength.
Okay.
I will say that red, very specifically, was not just a color of power and royalty, but also wealth, because it was a very expensive dye to be able to acquire.
Really?
Compared to other colors. Yeah, you had to. Primarily in Europe through the 1600s, in the 17th century, it was imported from the New World by the Spaniards throughout Europe, and it was actually a bug called a coconel that is found in Mexican cactus that they would take out, scrape, dry out, and then send back to the New World, or send back to the Old World, to Europe, where the importers would then grind it up and turn it into red dye.
Wow.
So it was this very specific sort of process that involved a lot of importing and exporting, and made it a very expensive colored dye. So if you had something that had any red on it, that meant that you had wealth, and especially if you had something that was primarily a red textile, that meant you were doing all right. You were showing off your wealth if you were wearing something red.
Wow.
Very similar thing with the Tyrian purple. It was like seashells, and like the parts that were the remains, they would grind up seashells to make this purple dye. And it's wild that, like, they have. It's interesting to think that through the ages, how this one thing that is so impossible. I think there's a lot of the themes that we've kind of touched on are these things that are just so hard to acquire that seem so normal these days. And something like the color, I want to tell Felix that's why things were in black and white back in the day. They just didn't have the color. They couldn't afford. But
too poor. Charlie Chaplin. So poor.
Rome, they'd wear their togas, and they'd have like a special lining of like a purple that would go around the edges of it to kind of denote their status. And yeah, just kind of fascinating that when you're decked out in one color, be it purple or red, that's the ultimate signifier of like, oh, this person really means something.
Wow, because all the colors kind of just think they cost the same. Now I don't look at them and think it costs more to wear a certain.
I remember like in like art school, and you'd have to like buy like some very specific colors of paint, of like oil paint, when I was doing like oil painting, and like I'm gonna murder it. I don't remember which one was like the really expensive one, if it was like cobalt blue or like phthalo blue, but like one of them was like exceptionally expensive for the small tube compared to like black sitting right next to it. You can get a big tube of black paint, but to get like the very specific blue, for example, was just 10 times as much.
Wow, I think I read that there was some trivia thing why barns were red so often in the United States, and it's because the paint had metal in it, and metal rusts so easily, and that red
doesn't rust as much.
No, red is essentially rusty paint. It's the rusting process. Basically, all paint will turn red because it had metal in it, and then that would oxidize or whatever.
So you're already there.
Right, just cut out the middleman.
Yeah,
right.
cut out the middleman.
So yeah, and I know with like in certain societies, like in Japan, for example, wearing red was outlawed if you were a commoner.
Oh wow!
You had to be part of nobility to be able to wear red. So some common non-elite would kind of get around this by lining the inside of their kimonos with red, so that it was something that wouldn't be seen normally, but when you would open it up,
and
red.
I've heard it's kind of a lucky color, right? But it's not just a sign of affluence. It's also a lucky or a valuable, an auspicious color.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay, then Richard, wrap up your 4.
All right, my 4th one is the idea of a car or a non-motorized carriage. So cars/carriages. Not the Model T.
Okay.
The Model T was kind of the first car that was made for the common person. Before that, the automobile, if you think back to the early, like, I don't know, Duesenbergs or the Rolls Royces, a lot of the early luxury cars were actually made by carriage manufacturers, because carriages, before motorized cars, it was considered to be a form of luxury to have a carriage. And then you got to the actual motorized vehicles, and those were seen as sort of a nouveau riche sort of thing for someone to purchase. Maybe the millionaire playboy. There's something that Gatsby would own, or something someone like that would own. It wasn't until the Model T that mass production started, and that's when cars became available for everybody. But before then, owning a car was considered to be kind of like something that your frat boy rich guy would own.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I guess I thought the Model T predated all those other things, or for some reason was kind of on at the same time. But there was a lot of automobile stuff going on.
There's automotive stuff that was going on, but it was just for the very rich and elite people to be able to own something like that.
There's a sci-fi book called "The Star's My Destination" by Alfred Bester, and in the book, the main premise is that humanity has kind of evolved to a point where they can self-teleport themselves, and the farther you can self-teleport, the kind of higher class you are in the society. And but it's also kind of built on these old families that are very, very rich, and they're so rich that they never teleport.
Okay.
They never So what they'll do is they'll buy all these really old methods of transportation to show their wealth. So like the car and like old carriages or locomotives or something became like these ultimate status symbols of like, I'm so wealthy that I don't have that I can go as slow as possible.
Yeah.
It's almost like how kind of being tremendously fat back in the day. It's like I can eat so well, and I can get myself to this stage of life and gluttony that to hell with all people starving.
Wow. So it's kind of some of the guys in the car culture in the 50s and 60s who started doing lowriders. We can't afford a Mustang, but we can show how low and slow. We can't go fast. We're going to show how low and slow we can go, and how flashy and bold and brave and cool our rides are going to be. So that's an interesting thing of like showing off your wealth by showing that you don't have to lift a damn finger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, so what was that?
That was Richard's just
My last
cars
one.
and
Okay.
carriages.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your last one?
My last one is the tulip craze.
Tulips, rink-a-dink-a-dink-a-dink.
How do you monsters? You doing monsters of megaphone over here? Tulips. Everybody's talking about tulips.
I thought it was Fred Schneider from the B-52s.
Could be both.
There was back in the 1600s. There was a huge Dutch tulip market that evolved out of all this incredible wealth that started kind of developing around the the trading companies, the merchants, the Dutch East India Company. So all these people from gaining this tremendous wealth started being able to plant flowers around their homes, and they would plant tulips, and these were these really rare kind of out of region flowers. And so people's interest started really getting, they're like, owning tulips became this symbol of wealth. And they started, because tulips take 7 years to gestate, to grow, they created this enormous speculative market on tulips. And so these tulip bulbs would start getting sold for what it would take, a general craftsman would take, what he'd make over 3 years would be the cost of one tulip bulb. Oh,
Wow.
The estimated
Yeah.
price. So there's all this, it's this big kind of this tulip kind of bubble of people putting money into this big tulip market. So to own one was, in the immediate time was a great symbol of wealth. But then all of a sudden, February of that year, the people that were coming to the markets to buy them didn't buy them.
Oh, shit.
And so the floor totally dropped out. So this thing that was perceived wealth is just suddenly was just okay,
Wow.
gone.
It's
Bye.
just fickle fate.
Yeah.
It's just we had their eyes on something else.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that now. It's like windmills, or something else. I was just watching Blade Runner, and there's a line where he's, interviewing Zora or somebody, the exotic dancer. He asked her, "Is that a real snake?" She said, "If I could afford a real snake, do you think I'd be working here?"
Yeah.
I love this world that Ridley Scott puts together. Okay, dudes, why don't we go? What a fun topic, right? Audience, I know you'll agree. Stop messaging us. We know it's fun. We know we're doing great here. Stop messaging us and emailing us and following us on all the social media handles. No, you can keep doing it. Where
are you going with this, Jeff?
Yeah, no,
Nailed it?
I'm concerned here.
So let's go with tulip. Let's go with pineapple because that got stuff off. That got us started.
Excuse me.
What's happening now?
Getting off with a pineapple?
know.
That's a...
Oh, guys. And salt because I use it every day. And why don't we go ice cream? Ice cream.
Because you scream, I scream, we all
Ice
scream.
cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. This has been the Mount Rushmore of Labadoo. As always, I'm Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.
I don't know.